This one right here.
Right. This is just for YouTube.
This is YouTube and Facebook. And I'm going to put in the comments the Zoom link if they want to communicate, if there is an opportunity to communicate.
Great. Should we stop?
Whenever you're ready, so I can share this.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا تأويله. So today, inshallah, we're going to start a course called Lost in Translation. Some of you might have read the description about the course. And so we're looking at some of the literary devices used in the Quran, and how when we read the Quran often in English, and even when we read the Quran even as people who know Arabic, many things are lost on us. Many things are lost. This is the point of this course, and ultimately this course is fulfilling a fard kifaya, which is to understand the i'jaz of the Quran, understand the miraculous nature of the Quran. Okay, so lost in translation. So first of all, we're going to talk about the problem. Second of all, an overview of the course. Thirdly, we're going to go through the A minor scale. So I'm hoping everybody has brought their pocket piano. Closer. A bit louder. We need to shout?
No, I think you bring it closer to the
okay. So inshallah, all of you have brought your pocket pianos, because we're going to look at the A minor scale inshallah today. Being British, we're talking about Winston Churchill, and we're going to talk about a big concept called transformational generative grammar in use. Is that still a little bit closer? Keep it like this, inshallah. Okay, so first of all, what is our problem that we're facing? So first of all, we have a language gap. Obviously, I don't speak Arabic. I'm not a native Arabic speaker, so when I read the Quran, there's a gap there. I don't understand what's going on. But in reality, there's more than that. There is a gap in dhawq as-salim. Dhawq as-salim. What is dhawq as-salim? It's somebody who gets the knack of the language. Just like when somebody says a joke in your slang, you find it funny, and somebody who doesn't know that culture, doesn't know that slang, doesn't get it. Similarly, even if you know Arabic, often there are certain things that are lost on us because we don't have what we call dhawq as-salim. We don't have that taste for the Arabic language. There are hidden secrets in the Arabic language that were just understood by the Sahaba and the Tabi'een. And over time, the scholars had to go and pick them out and say, how does it work on a technical level? Right, and this is the science of al-balagh, right, the science of al-balagh. Just to give an example of something that is lost in translation, right, we recite wal asr, innal insana lafi khusr, right? And so, inshallah, if I just ask everybody to Google the translation, if anybody has their phone on you, just look it up. MashaAllah, everybody has their, six shooters on them, right? How do we translate? Well, how do we translate this? How do we translate the beginning of Surah Al-Asr? Wal asr, innal insana lafi khusr. Right, I've translated it here. The man is in loss. Al-insan, the man. Right, the man is in loss. So, what other translations do we have?
Verily, man is in loss.
So, verily, man is in loss. Okay, any other translations?
Humanity is in grave loss.
Humanity is in grave loss. Okay? that's quite good. But the man is in loss is clearly wrong. It's wrong for two reasons. Right, it's wrong for two reasons. Al-insan, it means the man. But when we say al-insan in Arabic, it doesn't mean the man. It means humanity. It means people in general, i.e. all people. And it doesn't mean man as in the concept. Al-insan hayawanun natiq, for example. Mankind is a thinking or speaking living being. Right? That's not what it means. We're talking about, so here a bad translation of wal asri innal insana fi khusr is man is in loss. Right? A good translation, what was your name, brother? That was the brother Muhammad read, was in a great loss. Okay, and so my best translation is all mankind is well and truly surrounded by an unfathomable loss. That's my best translation. Now that's arguably not a literal translation. So you say, Farid, you didn't translate the Quran, you explain the Quran. So that's the problem. That's the problem. So why is it all mankind? Because it says, Innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu. So we understand that it has the umum. It means every single person that exists today is in loss. Illa alladhina amanu, except. Right? So as they'll tell us that istithna, when you make an istithna, when you say illa, it tells you we're talking about kull, you're talking about all before. Right? So when it says al-insan illa alladhina amanu, it means all. Kullu insanin ladhi khusr. Every single person was in loss. Okay? Well and truly, where do we get that from? Innal insana lafi khusr. The fact that there's in at the beginning of the sentence, and the fact that there's a la in the middle of the sentence, tells us that it doesn't mean mankind is in loss, but rather mankind is well and truly, definitely the case, absolutely the case. Okay? And he's in a loss. What does that mean? That means if you're inside something, it surrounds you. If you're in a box, I'm in a fix, i.e., to my right, to my left, in front, behind, etc. I'm surrounded by it. So when we say fi, right, it's for dharfiyya, that ana indi dharf. Right, we say in Arabic, ana indi dharf. I'm in a situation, I have a problem. I am surrounded by a problem. So the fi tells us that. Right, so this is just an example where something is lost in translation. Often we'll look at translations of the Quran, and the biggest mistake you'll see here is when they'll say loss, khusr, loss. It doesn't say loss. How do you say loss in Arabic? Al-khusr. That's called loss. You say al-khusru kada. Loss is X, Y, and Z. So that the ayah doesn't say al-khusr. Innal insana lafil khusr. It doesn't say that. Fi khusrin la yusaf. Nakira. Right? It's indefinite. In some kind of unbelievable loss that you couldn't define, you couldn't put a limit around it. So the tankir has a certain indication, right? So we're going to have a whole lesson on what's called tankir in Arabic. What happens when you do tankir? So here's an example of something lost in translation. So it says, "Wal asri." Mankind is well and truly surrounded by an unbelievable, indescribable loss. Right? Another example. I just want to give examples of, and we're going to come to this into more detail in a second. How many times in the Quran do we see الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ? 1,000,000 times in the Quran, okay? So we might translate it as those who believed, آمَنوا, it's past tense, وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, and they did good deeds, past tense. Okay, but we're going to see in Arabic that often the maldi, the fi'l maldi, what does it mean in Arabic? Does it mean past tense, al-fi'l maldi? Okay, as-sayf al-maldi, what does that mean? The past tense of sword? It doesn't mean the past tense sword. Right? What does it mean? It means something that cuts through something. So when you say in Arabic, when you say fa'ala zaydun, it means that Zayd did something and it's done and dusted. So the past tense means finished with. That's what it means. Done and dusted. And so it doesn't mean those who believed in the past. It means those about whom faith is a done and dusted fact. That's what it means. Right? Like when the Prophet ﷺ said, قُلْ آمَنْتُ بِاللَّهِ ثُمَّ اسْتَقِمْ. He's not telling us, oh, say Allah, by the way, last week I believed in you, so khalas, forgive me. It means آمَنْتُ, أَنِي تَحَقَّقْتُ بِالْإِيمَانِ. Right? You're trying to say, I've realized that thing. So الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا doesn't mean those who believed last year. It means those who believe and about whom faith is done and dusted. Just write on his. He's not even dead yet, but you can write on him khalas, mu'min. Right, this is what he is. Right, it's done and dusted. So the past tense, what does it mean? It doesn't mean it happened in the past. It means it's a done and dusted fact. Like when you say, بِعْتُكَ السَّيَّارَةَ, I hereby sell you the car, meaning my selling you the car is a done and dusted fact. Finished, done with, right? And so we might translate it as those who believed in the past and those who did righteous deeds in the past. No, it doesn't mean that. It means those who do it, but it's a fact, it's become a fact about them. Right? And have become realized in good deeds. That's a fact about them. It's almost like a past tense thing. Right? So the sense is the completeness, the finishedness, not the fact that it happened in the past. Right? قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. The believers have succeeded, or have they succeeded already? Arguably yes, because mashallah they've believed in Allah. Okay, which case is past tense. But arguably no, because they haven't entered paradise yet. What it means is فَلَاحُهُمْ أَمْرٌ يعني قَدْ تَمَّ وَفُرِغَ مِنْهُ. That's what it means. Right? It means their falah, their success, their happiness is something done and dusted. You don't have to think about it anymore. That's what it means. Another example, I'm just giving examples where we are lost in translation. Things don't, when we read the translation, it doesn't make sense. Right? فَمَا رَبِحَتْ تِجَارَتُهُمْ وَمَا كَانُوا مُهْتَدِينَ. Right? Let's have a go at Googling this one as well. Which ayah is it? This is maybe 18? No. I don't know which ayah of Baqarah. But we can just, you can Google, and their profit, they did not profit in their trade, and they were not guided. And let's have a see how it comes out in the translation. Because sometimes, subhanAllah, you look at 9 or 10 different translations of Quran, and all of them are off. Sometimes, mashallah, some of them are okay. Right? But where do we see the most problems? It's not that it's misunderstood the verse, but it's misunderstood the feeling of the verse.
16th ayah of Baqarah.
16th ayah of Baqarah. What does it say? What's the translation? فَمَا رَبِحَتْ تِجَارَتُهُمْ وَمَا كَانُوا مُهْتَدِينَ. They didn't, when they exchanged guidance for misguidance.
So their commerce was profitless.
And then?
And they were not guided.
And they were not guided. Okay? So may Allah reward whoever spent years and years translating this. May Allah reward them. So not to deprecate or discount what they're saying. It's not a good translation. They were not guided. How do you say they were not guided? Ma hudu. Ma hudu. Hudiya fulanun. He was guided, by Allah. Ma hudu. They were not guided. It doesn't say, it says ma kanu muhtadin. What does it mean? Right? It means ma kanu. They were not in the category of the people who do ihtida, who can receive guidance. Right? So it's like saying, nor were they even eligible to receive guidance. Right? It's like, oh bro, were you at the lesson last night? Bro, I wasn't even in America at the time. That's what it means. Ma kana muhtadin. They weren't even in the group of people called muhtadin, called somebody who does ihtida, somebody who takes on guidance. They weren't even listening. They weren't even there to begin with. So it doesn't say ma hudu, they weren't guided. That's what they weren't guided. Ma kanu muhtadin, they weren't in the category of people who even listen to guidance, who were even eligible to take on guidance. Right? Quite a big difference. Right? You weren't even in that. It's like not even close to receiving guidance. Not even in that category. Right? So these are examples of lost in translation. We read the Quran, it says one thing, okay, mashallah, and subhanallah, the nur of the Quran is so great that you can read the worst translation of the Quran and still be guided. Right? My friend, subhanallah, he was sitting in a bus stop in England, and some guy walks past him, gives him the worst translation of the Quran. He reads it, becomes Muslim, mashallah. Because it's not that complex. Often when we're giving da'wah, we make things very complex. It's like, oh, you have to understand this, you have to understand that, and you don't have to, it's not that complex. Right? The deen is quite complex. However, it's true, we miss out on the beauty of the Quran when we read it in English and it says they weren't guided. Or we don't get these points in Arabic language, right? And so they were not even in that they weren't in that category of people who would receive guidance. Right? This is a problem that applies to Arabs and non-Arabs alike. If you're non-Arab, I don't understand Arabic anyway. Right? But if for Arabs as well, sometimes the way we use things is very different. I'll give you an example. Right? In Levantine Arabic, they say Allah yazika khair. Right? Allah yazika khair. What does that mean? We're going to see in a second that means Allah, you know Him? Okay. He is going to increase you in good. But I don't want to say that. Why do you say Jazakumullahu khairan? You want to say past tense. I want that to be done and dusted. And I want that to be the focus. And I put Allah number 2 because He's not the focus of the sentence. I'm not talking about Allah. I'm not saying, for example, Allah yazika khair, yani badalan min fulan. Right? When I say, for example, may so and so reward you well, so no, may Allah reward you well. Right? That's what you would say if you say Allah did this. Right? Allah and not the other person. But I don't mean that. So I've said something that I don't mean, which is pointless. Right? So when we say, so often when we speak colloquial Arabic, there's things that don't really make sense. And there are certain things that are different as well. Right? There are certain things that are different. But this is a problem, this gap is a problem for Arabs and non-Arabs alike. Right? So that's why the Salaf, they didn't study Balagha. The Salaf, they didn't study Nahu. Right? Whereas for people, after a time, people couldn't speak Arabic properly, they couldn't get these nuances properly, and so they developed a science called Balagha, the science of these nuances. And sometimes these are not just beautiful, it's essential. Right? What is being said. Right? Now I remember, just as an example, who here speaks Arabic? Right? So in Jordan, they use this phrase, يَخْرِبْ بَيْتَكَ. You know this phrase? Right? So that's a curse. That means, may Allah destroy your household. It's a terrible curse. But you also use it, say, MashaAllah, seen Hassan's car, MashaAllah. Sayyara Mumtaz, Allah yakhrib bayt. Right? It means, MashaAllah, that guy, son of a gun, you know? That guy's got a car, right? And so there was a line of poetry, or someone who said, MashaAllah, the Khatib gave a beautiful khutbah. So that one of the attendees says, قَاتَلَهُ اللَّهُ مَا أَبَلَّ رِيقَهُ. May Allah kill him. How these words, how moist his saliva is. Say, bro, why are you making dua against him? And who cares about his saliva? Right? What you're trying to say is, like, man, that's so good. Right? It's like we say in America, darn it, man. It's like, who are you cursing? I'm not cursing anybody. But it's a phrase like, oh man. Right? So when you qatalahu Allah, may Allah curse him, may Allah fight him, you're not trying to make dua against him, you're saying, mashallah, that was a sick khutbah. Right? But you don't mean it's a sick khutbah. So how is it? Number one, how if it was sick, take it to hospital. If you meant that it was bad, then don't have him come back yesterday. But you don't mean that, right? So sometimes you misunderstood completely, and sometimes it comes into the deen, right? If we don't understand the balagha of the Quran, sometimes we misunderstand the Quran, right? You misunderstand the Quran completely. And inshallah, we'll see examples of that one by one. So that's just a general idea. So what's the overview of the course? Lesson 1. If we get through it today, inshallah, we have another 40 minutes, is the punch in the sentence. Right? How do we get the punch in the sentence? Inshallah, this is a very key thing, is basically sentence order, right? So I've entitled it a very complex way. Winston Churchill, the A minor scale, and the transformational generative grammar in use. Inshallah, we'll look at that today. Next lesson, which is the world of the unknown. The world of the unknown. Uses of the indefinite in Arabic. How we use the indefinite. Right? The whole lesson, inshallah ta'ala, just on the indefinite. There's about, 12 different usages of the nakira in Arabic. When you say ar-rajul or rajulun. Right? Just like in English, I might say, for example, yeah, dude, there's friends and there's friends. If I said there are the friends and the friends, how would it change? Completely different meaning. What you're trying to say is when there's friends and friends, and you use the indefinite, you don't put the word the, you mean there are some types of friends and other types of friends. But if I said there are the friends and the friends, like, that doesn't mean anything. So the indefinite is really important. Right? That was some lunch. Or why did you say some lunch? Why didn't you say the lunch? Right? That was some lunch, made it indefinite, some as opposed to the, and it suddenly meant there was something really important. Right? And so it's quite an important discussion. And then, the lesson after that, we can look at the definite in Arabic. When you say the, there's a huge issue here in Arabic. Right? How many times we hear Arabs saying, yeah, and the people, they do this. Right? It's like, hey, it's not the people, it's people. Okay, why did the Arab say the people? What does he mean by the people? right? And again, there's probably about 15 different uses of the word the in Arabic. When you say the, 15 different senses that you could mean. So what do you mean in this verse? What do you mean in that verse? It's pretty important, right? Okay, lesson 4, time warp, right? We spoke today about the past and the present. We're going to see in Arabic that sometimes tense goes out the window. There's no such thing as time anymore, right? And so that's an important thing. So the perfect and imperfect verb in Arabic. Lesson 5, the accidental and the essential, the difference between verbs and nouns in Arabic. Sorry guys, whoever's falling asleep because like, oh my god, you just said verb. I hate that word verb, right? I'm sorry. Yeah, our deen is based on knowledge. It is objective. It's not just based on how you feel. And so the ulama, they studied things like verbs and nouns and particles and all this stuff, things that we consider extremely boring today, but if we don't know about them, we get lost, right? Or it becomes something that's very like wishy-washy. Like, what are you even saying? It's like, no, this is a beautiful verse. Okay, why exactly, right? Not because it's nice. The Quran isn't nice. It's extremely powerful because of X, Y, and Z. We can actually take it apart with a knife and say this is what's going on, right? So comparison of use of verbs and nouns in Arabic. Lesson 6, the power of the zero. What happens when you drop a word? وَلَكِنْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. What's the difference between وَلَكِنْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ شَيْئًا or لَا يَشْعُرُونَ ذَلِكَ or لَا يَشْعُرُونَ? Right? So how powerful things can be when you don't say anything. Something's dropped. You see whole sentences dropped sometimes, whole words dropped. You can completely change what's going on. Sometimes you can say everything by saying nothing. Right? Then lesson 7, complex forms of simile in the Quran. And number 8, no pun intended, which is going to be on some literary devices in the Quran. Okay, so first of all, I want you to bring get your mobile pianos and guitars out, because we're going to do some music lessons. Right? So has anybody heard of a major and minor scale? You've heard of this word, right? So who's heard of scales in general in music? Has anybody heard of these things? Right, you've heard of the idea? You've heard of the maqamat? Yeah. Right? Heard of these things, right? So the scales are basically, you have a sound frequency, right? Like every time you make a sound, there's a sound frequency, or probably a whole load of frequencies at the same time, right? And that's called a note, okay? Based on the frequency. Now you put this note with that note, and another note, say, oh, hang a minute, that's called a song. That sounds nice, that sounds depressing, that sounds angry, that sounds happy. It's called music. So the whole science of music, right? So music is not something like, oh well, that's for somebody out there. It's a science, right? So it's a whole way of thinking, right? And so if we look at the something called the A minor scale. The minor scale is a sad scale, right? When you listen to it, it's sad. It makes you sad. Any sad song is going to be on a minor scale, right? And it's very, very simple in music. If you say, who's heard of do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, right? You all heard this, right? So it starts do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, right? That's how it works, right? So if you just go up that scale, starting with A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then go down, that's called the A minor scale. And it has a sad sound. So you take these same sounds, right, which has a sad sound, and if you were to start at a different place with those same notes, it will suddenly flip it to have a happy sound. So hang on a minute, how can you do the same sound? How can you have the same notes, but you start at a different place, and it suddenly sounds sad? It's like, yeah, that's what happens. Right? If you got me, and you got the table, and put the table behind me, it would look different, right? But it's the same table, and the same person. So sometimes you can have a system like music, like languages, like sentences, like programs. Who does software here? Right? The same thing, you swap this thing, put it there. I know that from, again, simple things like, what was it, HTML, right? Simple things, you move this to here, suddenly the paragraph is a different place. Right? And so this is a very fundamental thing. You have a simple system, you play with 1, 2, 3, suddenly you change the whole thing. Right? DNA. Right? Change one little thing in DNA, so it's now a completely different thing. Right? Completely different thing. And so we can change, in music, you can change from a sad song to a happy song just by starting on a different note. It's the same note, the same thing, and suddenly you change from the A minor to C major. Now it's a happy song, and you can do happy birthday song, right? Completely different song, right? And so, for example, those who have done maqamat, right? When we in Shad, when we recite the Quran, we recite it in maqamat, you'll see this, that, for example, someone's reciting the Quran, and suddenly something happy, and then it's suddenly shifted to a sad one. And sometimes they intend to because they're really good. Sometimes they don't. Why? It's because they suddenly shifted into another maqam that was very, very close, right? So, for example, with the same, A minor, if you start on F, it will shift from what's called the maqam al-ajam into the maqam al-jaharka, and it will suddenly have a different sound, right? And that happens now. Khair. So what am I trying to say is, if you have any system, a very simple system, and you shift something around, suddenly you get a completely different reality. It's completely different. So how is that relevant to language? How is it relevant to translation? How is it relevant to Arabic? Right? So alhamdulillah, Sheikh Imad and myself, we share a British education. We both share our love for Winston Churchill. Right? So Winston Churchill, he was a politician. He was also a drunk. And he was also an orator. He could speak very well. And so one of the things he was known for is very simple sentences where he just shifts words around. And this is what we'll see in the Quran. Sometimes you have a very simple sentence, you shift the word around, it will change everything. Right? For example, he gave a speech once, he says, "This is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end. But it is perhaps the end of the beginning." Right? So the beginning of the end and the end of the beginning. Very simple sentence. You just shift a little thing around, and then it becomes very strong and eloquent. So did he use a big word that I don't know? Did he say superciliousness? Did he use a word that, I have to pick a prediction to understand? No. And this is something that the scholars of Balagha, they discussed for a long time. They said, do you have to use a nice word to say something powerful? And the answer is no. You get a very simple system, flip it over, and it suddenly becomes very strong. And this is what we're going to see in the Quran. Another example here, Churchill says, "I expect that the Battle of Britain is about to begin. Upon this battle depends the survival of the Christian civilization. Upon this battle, our own British life, and the long continuity of our institutions and our empire." So notice how he says, upon this thing, upon this thing. Shift it around. What if you put it at the end? It wouldn't have anything. It wouldn't have any punch. It wouldn't mean anything. Just shifting order of words is everything. Right? Shifting the order of words is everything. So that's why we're talking about this very, very, very big word, which is transformational generative grammar. Can everybody say that in one breath? Transformational generative grammar. Right? It's a big word, you can Google it. In reality, it starts with Abdul Qahir al-Jurjani. Right? It starts with Abdul Qahir al-Jurjani. So he was a huge scholar of Arabic grammar, and a huge scholar of theology, and a huge scholar of balagha, of rhetoric in the Quran. And he sought to discover how could we objectively show that the Quran is a linguistic miracle. Okay? And we see many scholars in Islam, what they do is they play around in a field, and then they build on that field. So he played around in the field of Nahu, of Arabic grammar, for a long time. He played with that for a long time. And he has a large work in grammar. But he discovered something, that the strength of a sentence, when you say something powerful, it is not, again, about the words that you use. It is about playing around with variables. You have a certain set of variables, you play around with them in the right way, and that's all the strength of what's going on. Right? And so this is something we'll study in Balagha, we call the A'rad al-Musnad wal-Musnad ilayh. We look at the main part of a sentence. What are the variables that can happen to it? Or أحوال المسند والمسند إليه. Or أحوال متعلقات الفعل, for example. The various different things that can happen. So we'll give an example of this, right? And so Noam Chomsky, he spoke about this as well. Noam Chomsky, some of you might know him as a politician, as a linguist. So again, he's looking at grammar, and he's trying to say, well, what's the difference between somebody who knows basic grammar of a sentence, of a language, and somebody who uses that language in a very funny and a very lively way? But it's all about, he knows the bases, and and he knows what he can change, what he can't change. What slots can you put here and there? That's what's happening. Right? So he termed this idea, what is labelled as Abdul Qahir al-Jurjani's Nazariyat al-Nazam, his idea of how you structure things. He called it transformational generative grammar, and you can Google that. What is it basically? You have a system. There are certain things you can change in it, certain things you can't, and how you play around with those things that you change in it. Try and make sure everybody here is muted. Mute all. So, I come up and I want to make up a sentence. So I say, should I say I, or should I say we, or should I say you, or you can do anything you want. But if you say I, you, or we, now you have to choose a verb. So if you choose I, you're going to have to say something else. So as soon as you make a choice, you have to fill in other things. But you still have certain options, right? So this is how grammar works. So for example, I might say I eat. Okay, so now you have to start thinking about something you're going to eat, right? And so I might say I eat bread, I eat meat, or I might say I just eat, I like eating. So these are these variables that you can choose. You can choose this, you can choose that, and you can throw in certain things. Once you choose one thing, something else is forced in there. Okay? I say, for example, now I want to say I eat meat. So do you eat meat? Yes, I eat meat. Okay, so now I'm going to say I eat meat seldomly. I eat meat every day. I eat meat now and then. Or I eat meat. You can choose how you do it. Either mention a time, not mention a time. You can say different things. Okay. So what else could you do? I could choose the order. Right? I might say something like, right, now and then I eat meat. So now and then I eat meat. Or I might say, meat I eat now and then. It was quite different, isn't it? It's quite a different kind of sentence. Yeah, factually you're saying the same thing. That you're saying that you eat meat and you do it now and then, fine. Okay, that's the same fact. But the feeling is not the same. The feeling is not the same. And so this is where the joke comes out. This is where the power comes out when you play with these little things, put things in different places. So meat, I eat now and then. I, now and then, eat meat. Quite different again, right? So we have an example. Take the sentence, وَوَضَعَ اللَّهُ, and Allah put in place, وَوَضَعَ اللَّهُ الْأَرْضَ, the earth, لِلْأَنَامِ, for creatures, for us and all living beings. So, and Allah put or established the earth for creatures. Simple sentence. Jazakumullah khair. Very simple sentence. Okay, so we look at the variables. So the first variable that we have in Arabic is, are we using a noun sentence? We're using a verb sentence. In English, we don't have that difference. In English, every single sentence has a verb in it. Who knows the shortest sentence in the Bible? Guys, come on. You're not doing a juz of the Bible every day? What's wrong? So, Jesus wept. That's the shortest sentence in the Bible, right? Jesus wept. So every single sentence in English has to have a verb. You can't have a sentence in English without a verb. It doesn't exist. I am. Right? I exist. It's always a verb. In Arabic, it's not the same. In Arabic, you can do one or two things. So I'm going to say something. So you say, okay, fine, what happened? You say, oh, I saw Bob. So either you're going to talk about you, or you're talking about seeing. So you have to choose immediately. Are you going to talk about seeing, or are you going to talk about yourself? If you're talking about yourself, you're going to say, Ana ra'aytu Bob. Right? Or if you're talking about seeing, you're saying ra'aytu Bob. So immediately, I've already chosen my options. Are you talking about what happened and telling you how the details of that? Or are you talking about a person and a fact about that thing? Okay? So immediately, when you say, okay, there's a sentence, what happened? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the earth. Okay, big deal. Are you talking about Allah? Or are you talking about putting? Okay, it's two different sentences. Right? And so we have to choose in Arabic immediately. Are you going to go here or are you going to go there? What's your focus? What are you talking about? What's your paragraph about? Is it about Allah? Or is it about what Allah did? Is it about the process that happened, or is it about Allah? Okay? So now you have to start thinking, well, okay, if there's a noun sentence, if it's going to be about Allah, are you going to talk about Allah and talk about what He is? Talk about Allah and then what He does? You have three different levels, three different things we can put there. We can mention a sentence with a noun as a predicate, a sentence with a verb as a predicate, or sentence with a predicate as a predicate, a noun as a predicate. For example, Allah is noble, Allah is nice. So I have lots of different things I can start doing. I have lots of different things I can start doing. I can also then start playing. Do I want to put the default settings of the sentence order, or I want to shift it up? Right. So let's have a look at this sentence. Very simple sentence in the Quran. Right. So وَوَضَعَ اللَّهُ الْأَرْضَ لِلْأَنَامِ, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put the earth down for people and creatures. Okay. So what is this? Is a now this is a verb sentence. So what does that mean? It means, hey guys, I'm talking about what happened. I'm not talking about Allah. That's something secondary. So I want to talk about Allah. What do I do? I say, Wallahu wada'a al-ard lil-anam. Right? And so when we translate it, again, immediately, I've lost what you said. Are you talking about Allah, or are you talking about what happened? We need to know. Right? And so we can translate it, and Allah put the earth in place for all creation. Simple sentence. Wallahu wadi'un al-arda lil-anam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is putting down, this is a noun sentence now, He is something. What is Allah? Allah is the person who's going to do that. Complete different sentence. You're talking about who Allah is. You're trying to tell me, okay, tell me something about Allah. Oh, Allah is this. Complete different sentence. Right? And then He's saying He made the earth and it's for people. Okay, great. So Allah is the one who put or will put the earth in place for all creation. So He's saying something else. Basically the same words. But did you choose this? Did you choose that? Are you trying to talk about Allah? We're talking about something that happened. And who did it? Two different sentences. And we can say what else? And so this is a very important thing that again we'll have a whole lesson on, is that when we, in Arabic, when we're going to say talking about myself, you say for example, Ana fa'alt, or Allah did this, Ar-Rahman, etc., everything else. I'm trying to say I'm not talking about time. I'm talking about a fact. There's no time involved. Talk about an absolute fact. Okay? As opposed to when you say fa'altu wa af'al, I did or I'm doing, you're saying there is a certain time. And so it's limited to a certain thing. So am I putting a limit to it or am I not putting a limit to it? All of these variables coming out. All of these variables coming out. Okay? So Wallahu yada'u al-arda lil-anam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, talking about Him, I'm saying, by the way, focus on Him, listen about to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the one, He is putting the earth down for people and creatures. Okay, great. It's a different sentence again. Right? And so we have to understand what is the focus. So if I say something like, Wallahu wada'a al-arda lil-anam, and Allah, He put the earth in place for creatures. What's the first thing I'm focusing on? Allah, He's number one. You put Him first. Number two, you put the verb. So the second, I'm not talking, the second thing is what He did. Third thing is the earth. Fourth thing, for whom? Right? I'm telling you, what is the most important thing? Allah. What is the second most important thing? What He did. What's the third thing? What happened is who it happened to. And the fourth thing is who it's for. That's the point there. What if I change the order? What if I say something like, Wallahu lil anami wada'al ard. What's the focus now? What's focus number one? Wallahu. Allah is focus. Number two, who is it for? Creatures and everything else. Number three, what He did. And number four, what it happened to. Right? And so we're going to have a complete different shift every single time we change the order. So again, we have one sentence. We can say the same sentence in probably about 25 different ways. And so where's the punch in the sentence? Not the words that are used. If you say wada or ja'ala, yeah, that affects things. But what's going on? It has major shift. وَلِلْ أَنَامِ وَضَعَ اللَّهُ الْأَرْضِ. What's the focus now? For you guys, creatures on earth and people. Number two, وَضَعَ, put. Number three, Allah. And number four, the earth. Okay? So we're saying the same sentence in I don't know how many different ways, complete different focus. So number one is, who is it for? It's for you guys, people who live on earth. Number three is Allah. Number two is His putting. And number four is the earth. Right? وَالْأَرْضَ وَضَعَ اللَّهُ لِلْأَنَامِ. What's the focus now? وَالْأَرْضَ وَضَعَ اللَّهُ لِلْأَنَامِ. The earth, right? So here we have two variables. Did you say wal arda or did you say wal ardu? If you're saying wal arda, it has a fatha, that means it's going to be, I'm talking about the earth from the point of view of it being created. Okay, the same word, earth. Yeah, in English, it's the same word. In Arabic, it's not. If you're saying wal arda, I'm saying the earth, i.e. the creation of the earth, and Allah putting it in place, put it in place, Allah for us. That's with a fatha. What if it had a dhamma? Right, suddenly, wal ardu wada'aha Allahu lil anam. I'm saying, you know the earth? Yeah, I know the earth. I'm going to tell you a fact about the earth. What is the fact about the earth? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put it there for us. Okay, complete different meaning. Fatha dhamma. Right? And so, this is what I'm trying to say is, you play with one little thing, and suddenly you've shifted the whole feeling of the sentence. What is your message? What is trying to be said? Right? Yeah, it's the same words. Put them again. It's a completely different feel. Right? And so one thing we see in Arabic is there's so many things we can do that again when we translate it, it's all lost. Because you just can't, the sentence cannot be said in English. Right? Okay, so what would this mean if I said wal ardu wada'aha Allahu lil anam? That would mean the fact about the earth is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put it. That's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is number 3 now. He's not even focused at all. Right? And that number 2, that happened, and number 4 right at the end is who is it for? Right? And so when we're reading the Quran, we have to see these things, and in the translation that has to come out. Which word is coming first? What is being focused? What's not focused? And sometimes we see ajib, and things that are impossible to translate because you couldn't get that level of emphasis in Arabic. So how many ways of saying one thing? And so when is it baligh? When is it strong? When is it like, yeah, this is what's so powerful is that the exact thing is being said in that place. The exact thing in that place is being said. Right? Give an example as well from the Quran. إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُسْتَهْزِئُونَ. Right? Who says this? Who knows that verse? إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُسْتَهْزِئُونَ. Who says it? Does anybody know? The munafiqun, right? The hypocrites, they say to the other hypocrites, guys, we're just having a laugh. We're just having a laugh. So nahnu, you know us, I'm going to tell you a fact about us. You were doubting that you thought I was a believer. It's like, dude, I'm not a believer. I'll tell you a fact about myself. We are just mockers. We just people having a laugh. So Allah, they uses a noun sentence. A fact about us is that we are, as a fact, guys having a laugh. So don't doubt when you see me doing something. Don't doubt it because it's a fact about me that I'm just a person having a laugh. That's who I am. Like when you see me praying in the mosque, dude, it's just a joke, right? So how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala respond to that? So they used a fact about them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, there's a fact about Allah, you don't know what's going on. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't say what does Allah do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers what they're doing with a fact about Allah. They say the fact about us is we guys are just having a laugh. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Wallahu yastahzi'u bih. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala flips it, says, well, you want a fact about Allah? A fact about Allah is that right now He's mocking them, yastahzi'. So they use a fact about themselves, He's using a fact about Himself. But there's a slight difference. They say we are just mockers, that's just who we are. We're just people who have laugh. We would never pray out of seriousness, ever. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds a fact about Himself, but uses the fi'l mudari', uses istahzi', saying right now He's mocking them. As they're talking, He's mocking them. And so what? We could phrase this in many different ways. But again, where is the strength of the Quran? It is the exact phrase at the exact time. A fact for a fact. A thing about who they are, and a thing about what Allah is doing to them the whole time. Right? This is the strength that we see in the verse. Another example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءُ. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءُ. So the default setting in Arabic is you say, the verse mentions the only people who fear Allah, the only people who really fear Allah are people who know. Right? If you know and appreciate who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, That's the only way you can really fear Allah. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't say the only people who fear Allah are the people who are like that X, Y, and Z. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the only people who fear and leaves the person who's fearing them right to the end of the sentence. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the only people who fear leaves who's fearing right at the end and says Allah, and you're like, yeah, okay. Of his slaves, you're like, okay, is the ulama. And so here we see a number of things. By putting it to the end, what happens? When you put something right at the end, say, I'm going to tell you a secret, very secret, a top secret. I can only tell you if you promise not to tell anybody. What is this called? When you delay somebody, it's called tashweeb. Tashweeb, pulling the person in. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give that punch. That when you hear the point, it really hits. Allah delayed it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى. Okay, that's the person that's fearing. Okay, who's fearing? Allah, okay, Allah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, puts something else in its place, delays it even more with the word مِنْ عِبَادِهِ, those of his slaves. Who? Okay, those of his slaves who what? Ulama. Puts it right at the end. Right? Puts it right at the end, so that when you hear it, it hits. As opposed to, إِنَّمَا الْعُلَمَاءُ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ يَخْشَوْنَهُ. It's not the same. It's only the people who really know Allah that fear Him. No. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. Hits you right at the end. Right? And we'll see that even happening sometimes in the Quran, where the sentence will be cut by an ayah, so that when it hits, فَأَوْلَى لَهُمْ, right? طَاعَةً وَقَوْلٌ مَعْرُوفٌ, right? So even you've got, that's even more of a punch, because you've got the ayah cut in half, and it would be better for them. Full stop. Better what? A little bit of if they would only just obey a little bit, if they only said a few nice words. So splitting it gives the punch. Right. So here we can just see the sentence order. All you did is you got the words, flipped them over, and it gives it power. You said the same thing. Yeah, but how did you organize it? Right? Again, we heard with Churchill, he didn't use very complex words. He just played with the order. Right? This is what we see here. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ who? Al-ulama. Right? So ulama here doesn't mean you have to be an alim to fear Allah. Right? Many ulama don't fear Allah, like myself, may Allah forgive me. Right? I walked in here, I had the audacity to walk in here and pray Maghrib like 10 minutes before the lesson. May Allah forgive me and give me taqwa. Right? So the ulama, he means people who know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have appreciation for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So an alim is not somebody who's memorized the Quran or has memorized a million thousand hadith. It's somebody who applies their knowledge. Right? May Allah forgive me. Another example. وَإِذْ يَرْفَعُ إِبْرَاهِيمُ الْقَوَاعِدَ مِنَ الْبَيْتِ وَإِسْمَاعِيلَ. There's a number of things here. So what does it say? It says, and remember when Sayyidina Ibrahim and his son Sayyidina Ismail were building the foundations of the house. Fine, it's a simple sentence, anybody can say that. But notice how it's phrased in Arabic. It says, إِذْ يَرْفَعُ. What does يَرْفَعُ mean? Who knows what يَرْفَعُ means? When? Now or then? يَرْفَعُ, past? Right. Present. Okay, wait, it happened in the past then. So, okay, why does it say وَإِذْ رَفَعَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ وَإِبْنُهُ إِسْمَاعِيلُ قَوَاعِدَ الْبَيْتِ? Right? So again, we have options. You can say رَفَعَ or you can say يَرْفَعَ. You have an option. So if I said يَرْفَعَ, that would mean it's happening now. And if I said رَفَعَ, that would mean it's done and dusted. Right? So the point would be, and remember when this job was done and dusted and finished with? Or are you trying to say remember when it was happening? Right? It's almost like a camera is zooming in, right? And you can see now, look, it's happening right now. Yarfa, it's happening right now. Right? It's important to understand in Arabic, we'll mention a whole lesson on it, that there's no such thing as time. The madi does not mean the past, and the mudari does not mean the present. When you say you don't have these words. So it says, and look, Ibrahim is doing it right now. And remember it's happening. And even subhanAllah, what do we see right after it? It says, وَإِذْ يَرْفَعْ إِبْرَاهِيمُ الْقَوَاعِدَ مِنَ الْبَيْتِ وَإِسْمَاعِيلُ رَبَّنَا. You just jump straight into their sentence as if you're there. Right? So the whole thing is just playing with variables and suddenly pulls you right into the scene as if you're there. It's happening right now. And it's not something that it didn't happen and then so-and-so says that so-and-so says that so-and-so says that they heard him say this. No. We're not dealing with a story, we're dealing with the Quran. Right? So that is if you're there in that very point. And look what's happening. Abraham and his son Ismail are building the Kaaba right now. And they're making this dua. So it says, وَإِذْ يَرْفَعْ. And so who comes first, Ibrahim or Yarfa'? Which comes first? وَإِذْ يَرْفَعْ Ibrahim or Ibrahim Yarfa'? Which one? Okay, so what's the focus then? The action, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, remember when this process was happening and it was being done by Ibrahim. It doesn't say, remember when Ibrahim did this. So how would you translate it into English? How would you get that focus across? You might have to put it in the passive. Remember when the Kaaba was being built? But it's literally saying, remember when it's saying the process is happening, it's happening right now in front of you, it's being done by Sayyidina Ibrahim. How do you do that in English? You can't. Right? So that's why we said lost in translation. Right? Lost in translation. Right? And so look, this process is happening right in front of your eyes, and it's being done by Sayyidina Ibrahim, right? Al-Qa'id al-Bayt wa Ismail, along with Sayyidina Ismail. Okay. So this was the end of the lesson. There we go. Is that okay? Right? And so we mentioned the problem. What was the problem? Is we said a million nuances in Arabic that are extremely difficult to translate into English. And one of my teacher, he's working on a translation. One of my teachers is working on a translation of the Quran, and he spent about 15 years so far working on translation. And sometimes, subhanAllah, he'll spend ages and ages on the translation, and it comes out basically the same as any other translation. Because sometimes it's like, yeah, I understand exactly what's being said in the Quran, exactly, and I understand, I get the whole feeling, but when I put it into English, it just dies. SubhanAllah. Right, that happens sometimes. We mentioned the overview of the course, which we're looking at. We mentioned next week we're looking at the indefinite, what happens when we make it indefinite, when we make it definite, these different things, and a million different things that are lost in the Quran. We mentioned today about the major and minor scale, the same system, the same notes. You suddenly shift from one thing to the other, it becomes a sad song to a happy song. The same thing, you get one sentence, flip it suddenly becomes very, very powerful. And we mentioned examples of transformational generative grammar in use. Inshallah, tomorrow morning, you'll wake up with the first word on your lips will be transformational generative grammar. Inshallah ta'ala. Okay, jazakumullah khair. Any quick questions? Okay, so stop here, inshallah ta'ala. Subhanallah bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha ant.